Hey everybody, it's Eric alongside Rod to go over MSU's last game against Samford before the Maui Invitational next week. Quick reminder to check out our support page at tffinots.com/support to find our great sponsors, other deals, and ways to support the show via one-time gifts or recurring gifts through Patreon or Substack. Also, we have the Beat Rod contest where the entries are due before the first Big Ten game, which is in a couple weeks now. So you have the opportunity to win $100 in prizes from Nudge Printing if you can predict the final Big Ten standings for the 18 teams in the Big Ten. As a tiebreaker, you need to send me the points you think Michigan State will score against Michigan. Reminder, they do play twice. You can send that along to me at Eric, E-R-I-C, at tffinots.com. Okay, Rod, let's talk about the Samford Bulldogs from the Southern Conference. The Bulldogs are 3-1 under Bucky McMillan. That's his real name, I think. You might remember them from their narrow loss last year to Kansas in the opening round of the NCAA Tournament. They're once again projected to win the league this season. And I think probably the most defining characteristic for the team is their tempo. And we thought we saw tempo with Bowling Green, but this team is another level up. They're number 2 nationally, and the offensive length of possession is number 23. So very fast. And they were last year, they're number 8, number 6. So they've definitely, for Bucky McMillan, it's pretty consistent in sort of how they play. They have a problem with turnovers, which maybe not that surprising since they play so fast. They've not been a great shooting team, 33.3% from deep, which, boy, we take that. And 149th with 2-point percentage. Offensive rebounding is okay. They're about 32.3%. And the one thing they're really good at doing is getting to the line. Probably, I think, a reflection of just playing so fast and that probably just attacking the rim a lot. They're number 25th in free throw attempts to field goal attempts. And just in comparison, Michigan State, which is having a really great season as far as free throw attempts, is 89th. So they're a couple levels up from what Michigan State is.
One note on that, though, that's also a reflection of the fact that they're turning the ball over a lot more than Michigan State is.
Right. So they have less attempts.
They're getting fewer chances to score. Yeah.
Right.
The difference isn't quite as stark as that makes it sound.
Sure. Also, they shoot about 72% from the line, which is not bad. Last year, they were really good shooting the ball. So they've, not been quite what they were last season. And we've never heard that story before, right? On defense, they've not been good. They don't turn the ball over a lot. They're 147th in turnover percentage. They've not been a good defensive rebounding team. They're 319th, giving up almost 38% of rebounds to offensive team. They've been very bad at fouling, and they're 235th in 2-point percentage against as well. So in many respects, their defense profile is bad, but they've been able to overcome the other teams with their tempo and their offense. They maybe get some steals or 79th in stealing, but again, that's not great. And so, they come in against Michigan State, a team that is not been shooting well, but in a lot of those things is really good at it. So it should be an interesting matchup, I think, on Tuesday night.
Yeah. I think that MSU is playing what's been an interesting non-conference schedule so far this season. And it will continue too. And I'm talking about the non-heavyweight games. I think it remains to be seen where Bowling Green stacks up in the end in the MAC. But I think if they play anywhere close to the level they played at last night, offensively, I think that's going to be a team that has a pretty nice season. This team is ranked or was picked in the coaches poll as the favorite in the Southern Conference.
Mm-hmm.
And so, that's a challenge. And a lot of people saw that game against Kansas. There was a controversial call, if I remember correctly, at the end of that one that helped seal the win for the Jayhawks. A lot of people felt Samford deserved to win. And they play a brand of basketball that's exciting. It's, as you talked about, the tempo is very, very high at all times. And that's not just on offense. On defense, they apply a lot of full court pressure. So they want to get you in a fast game. Bucky McMillan, I think, is generally seen as one of the rising stars in the mid-major ranks. And it would not be, in fact, if they win another regular season title in the Southern, which would be their 3rd straight if they do it, I would be more surprised to not see him get a high major job than the converse.
Yeah.
I think because the combination, he ticks all the boxes. He plays an exciting style, so that's easy to sell. He's won with it, so that's important too. And he's very young. And he's an
Yeah.
interesting guy too. He came directly to that job from the high school ranks. He had coached at a high school. He's a native of that area, but the school's from Alabama, Homewood, Alabama, and he's from that area. I think he grew up like a half hour from Samford's campus. And he had coached in the high school ranks and been extremely successful and got hired for the Samford job, which is really the only kind of job you could ever be hired for at the D1 level straight out of high school would
Yeah,
be a
for sure.
job like Samford. But he's made the most of it. He's had a tremendous run so far, and I think this is his fourth or fifth season at Samford. But as I say, I just think you look at everything, his style of play, his results, and his age, and man, it just seems obvious to me that a high major is likely to come calling. And so it'll be interesting. It'll be interesting to see how that goes. But for the time being, they've got to deal. Teams in the Southern Conference and Michigan State specifically this week have to deal with his Samford team. It doesn't, to me, look like this group, at least not yet, is humming at the level that last year's team was. And that's not surprising because as we go through this, Samford's affected by the same factors that
Yeah.
everybody else is. They got a lot of new guys, mostly transfers. And so you're reinventing things on an annual basis, you know? And he's the good thing is he's got a style of play and a method that I'm sure dictates the way they approach the portal. You know, he's going to go after guys that he thinks can play within that system. The big difference right now between last year and this year is last year, besides the pace of play, they were also an elite shooting team from three and from two. They were really, really good. And this team so far, and admittedly it's early, they have not been.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's going to be a big difference. You know, you can through pace of play, you're going to generate a fair amount of offense, even if you're not a great shooting team. But boy, when you can marry that to dead eye shooting, then you've really got something. And so right now that looks like an issue. Defensively, they just don't look like they're very good. One big difference I see is that last year, although they weren't great in some core areas, they weren't great, let's say, at limiting opponents' success shooting the ball against them, but they did generate a lot of turnovers. And this year, they thus far at least, they have not been doing that nearly as well. So those are all going to be problems for them, at least in a game like this, if they can't change that equation a little bit. As you noted, really weak defensive rebounding team, so that opens up an opportunity for Michigan State as well. So yeah, it'll be an interesting game, and the nice thing is coming off that Bowling Green experience, it shouldn't be any kind of shock to the system from Michigan State to be facing a team that wants to go as fast as Samford does,
Right.
because they just saw it. And I think in the first half of that game against Bowling Green, Michigan State actually was not particularly good in terms of its transition defense, right?
Yeah.
They got better as it went along. So you hope that that carries over into this game with the relatively short turnaround. They're realizing, yeah, we're playing somebody that wants to run just as much, if not more, than Bowling Green did, and that they're able to balance the floor a little more effectively for the full 40 minutes.
Yeah. Just a note to listeners that we're recording this episode. We were trying to do this in a time that fits our schedule. So it is before Samford's game, right before they're playing Texas Southern
Yeah.
after we record this. So if there's any sort of up-to-date things, we don't have those obviously in place. But anyway, so
Yeah,
just a
it's gonna
quick note.
affect the numbers that we're talking
Right.
about, but it won't affect you're still getting the overall sense of what this team is. And actually, Samford, I'm looking at it with about 13 minutes left. They're winning that game by 24. So a comfortable win over Texas Southern is what it looks like it's happening. And boy, they're They're 17 of 34 from three. So they found the range from three.
Yeah. And there are other games where they beat Mississippi College, who I assume is a D2 or something
Yeah,
school.
they haven't
Lost,
they haven't played exclusively D1 opposition yet.
right.
Yeah.
Lost at Cornell by 2, beat Rhodes by 56 points. I think that's probably
Yeah.
D2 or 2 as well.
Yep.
And North Alabama by a point at North
Right.
Alabama. So anyway, so not the stiffest of competition, but definitely just getting warmed up for the season. Well, let's talk about the starters for the Samford Bulldogs. It's brought to you by the Brothers Adjust Your Gutters. This guy here is gonna be lucky. I get to sit between both the brothers at the game on Tuesday night, so we'll get to watch Samford in person, which is kind of fun. We'll see how if Michigan State's defense is leaky. Hopefully not. If not, then you want to be, if you do have problems with leaky things like your gutters, you want to talk to the Brothers Adjust Your Gutters. They take care of all those sorts of problems. Whether it's just plugged up with leaves, we have problems, your downspouts, whatever it might be, they can replace it, clean it out. They can just repair things, whatever needs to be done, whether it's a long section, all your gutters, just a small section, whatever it is needs to be done. The brothers can do that job for you. And it doesn't really matter what the weather is outside, like a thunderstorm or middle of a blizzard. They can get up on the ladders. They'll take care of all that stuff. So you don't have to. You get 10% off if you mention Final Four when you get your estimate. You can find ways to contact Kurt or Greg if you're either on the east side or the west side of the state of Michigan. At our support page at the Final Four is on the schedule.com/support. Call them today. You'll be glad you did. And you'll put those gutter problems in the past. And they sponsor the player that Michigan State needs to keep in the gutter, which we'll go over as soon as we go through all the players. We'll begin with Rylan Jones, 6-foot COVID senior point guard, preseason All Southern choice, second-year Bulldog, played earlier at Utah and then Utah State. He's averaging 6.5 points a game on 32, 28, and 71 shooting, and more than 6 assists per game to just 2 turnovers a game. And last season, just to give an example, instead he was shooting 43% from the field and 37 from 3. So maybe today will help him a little bit with his numbers.
It's funny you mention that because again, with 13 minutes left, he's 6 for 7 from 3 today.
There you go.
So he's found the range. He's an interesting, and look, I can't pretend to be an expert on all things Samford, but he's an interesting case because usually when you see these situations where guys are transferring down, there's a reason, right? Well, they're not playing. But this guy was a starter at Utah as a freshman. And he was a starter later than that at Utah State. And yet he's continued, he's gone from the Pac-12 to the Mountain West to the Southern Conference, despite the fact that he's always had a big role. So I guess I would actually like to know the story there, because it's not the usual path that you see. But look, Bucky McMillan's really happy to have him because this is a pure point guard. I mean, in a high level pure point guard. He's, despite the fact that coming off last season, he didn't even average double digits in terms of his scoring average. He was still a first team All Southern preseason choice. So this is a really good player, you know, and exactly the kind of floor general that is ideal for a team that wants to play fast, because unlike some of his teammates, he doesn't tend to make a lot of mistakes with the ball. So very, very good player for them. He's also, I wouldn't say he's a great defensive player, but he is a guy who is at least an active defender for them. So a lot to like in terms of his game. And boy, if he can, if he's managed to find his way out of his mini shooting slump with what he's doing today against Texas Southern, so much the better for them.
Then we've got Julian Brown, 6'1" junior transfer from Wagner. He's averaging 11.3 points a game on 39, 38, and 73 shooting, with about 2/3 of his shots coming outside the arc.
Yeah, and that's his role. You can see it pretty clearly. Because he's not any kind of supplementary ball handler, floor leader kind of guy. He's a shooter. And that's what he's in there to do, is to make shots from deep.
Then we have Trey Ford, who's a 6'4" senior, transferred from Mississippi State. He was also at UT Martin and JUCO. He's been on the move in the transfer portal era. He's averaging 13.3 points a game and 5.8 rebounds a game on 39, 31, and 50. And similar to Julian Brown, a lot of his shots come from outside the arc. His are a little bit over half.
Yeah. And look, guys with this kind of profile are going to end up and play at places like Samford where they don't worry so much, and particularly if it's a guy's last year, I guess you're just going to say, all right, we'll try to get what we get out of him. But it is phenomenal. This guy's been 2 JUCOs, a couple of other colleges, D1 schools. It's I know I wouldn't want to be dealing with it. I can tell you that, but because that says something to me at least. But he's been effective for them in the early going, and they obviously needed someone to slot in to a bigger wing role, and he gives them, at least decent size at 6'4". I mean, I would imagine that early on in this game, he'll probably be matching up with Frankie Fiddler.
Right.
Maybe we'll also match up with Cohen Carr. So that'll be interesting to see because he's definitely operating at a physical disadvantage against guys like that. But he's been productive as a scorer and a rebounder, and they need both.
Yeah, in today's era, with these players, in some ways, it's almost like the career ladder, right? To try and probably move from one JUCO to the next, you move from and to other schools, and so yeah, I
Oh,
think in the past,
absolutely.
in the
Yeah.
past, it may have been like a reflection. Like, we look at AJ Storr, a good example of a guy who just, it doesn't make much sense, his moves, except that he just can't sit with any place for very long. And this could be just a situation where he's just looking for a way to sort of, improve his standing and getting, not NIL money, but certainly eyeballs on you and potentially moving on after that. But anyway,
Well, and I think that that part is important to an extent, certainly, with some of these guys. I was having that discussion about the Johnson kid from Bowling Green that was a D2 player last year.
right.
And the advantage that the situation has opened up for guys like him is honestly playing at the D2 level. That truly is a situation where it might be tough to get eyeballs on you. And if he has aspirations of playing professionally, I'm not talking about the NBA, but your odds are much better that you're going to be given a fair shake, at
Yeah.
least coming from a D1 school where it's going to be easier for people to have seen you. And so I think that can be a factor in some of these situations. But yeah.
Then we got Colin Holloway, 6'6" senior transfer from Tulane. Also played a couple years at Georgetown. He's averaging 13.3 points a game and 5.5 rebounds a game on 43, 46, and 85 shooting. And so he was a good scorer at Tulane as well. So it
Yep.
makes you suspect that he can play at this level as well.
Another guy who was a preseason first team All Southern choice as a transfer, as a portal guy. So obviously there was respect for his production at Tulane, and he has continued right along a similar path in his first few games at Samford. Undersized four-man, that'll create something interesting with
Once again, it's a challenge for our four men, right?
It is, but if you assume that Jackson Kohler, for example, starts, it may also open up some opportunities for Jackson Kohler to go to work in the post. I think it'll be interesting to see how Samford's hope is going to be, of course, that they turn this into such a chaotic game that those kind of matchup difficulties don't really end up playing
Right.
out, but at least you could see it both ways. You could see, oh, Jackson's going to have to guard a guy who can really shoot. But at the other end, they might have to guard Jackson in the post with a guy who's essentially a glorified guard.
Right.
And that's not great, So
finally, Jaden Brownwell. He is a 6'9", 230-pound junior transfer from Illinois, Chicago. He's doing really well this year. He's averaging 17 points a game and 5.5 rebounds a game, shooting 66, 57, and 83.
Yeah, so he creates a challenge for Michigan State's fives, obviously, because he really is a capable deep shooter. And so they're going to have an awareness of what he is. He started half their games. Basically, he and their top backup share the position, and they actually are both been very productive in the early going. So Samford is getting good play out of their fives, but with Hibbs specifically, he's a little bit unconventional in that so much of the damage he does is from the perimeter. So that means guys like Cooper, Zapala, etc., are going to have to be aware of that, or Michigan State might find themselves in situations where they're going with smaller lineups.
And then there's I think, kind of a pretty clear drop off when you move off from the starters on Samford. I mean, Riley Allenspach is a 6'11". He's the backup to Brownwell, 240-pound sophomore. Played last year as part of the rotation. He's averaging 5.6 points a game and 2.9 rebounds a game. He's had a couple good scoring games this season, high rebounding games as well. 59, 25, 71 shooting, so kind of more conventional five.
Yeah, well, the numbers you mentioned are actually his numbers from last year as a freshman.
Oh, right. Yeah.
He's been more productive this year as a sophomore. He's averaging double digits. And he's sharing that position, as I said. He's more of a conventional five in that he doesn't have the stretch element to his game. But, this is a real for a program like Samford, and we see this all the time. You kind of saw it yesterday with Bowling Green, right? That they typically, if they lack anything in comparison to high majors, it's usually inside. If
Yeah.
they've got big guys, they tend to be limited for one reason or another, and then oftentimes they just don't really have them. Well, this team's got a legitimate high major D1 rotation at the center spot from a physical point of view, and they complement each other well. One guy is more of a skill finesse scorer type. The other guy more of a conventional big body, does a lot of work around the rim. He can defend. He can rebound a little bit. It's a nice mix, and that can be a reason why Samford is going to be a load to deal with in the Southern, because they actually have that option available to them,
Right.
which not everybody at that level does. The other thing that's worth mentioning, you're going to see it as we go through these reserves. We mentioned that, Samford, like everybody else at this level, and really even the high major level, is a work in progress because they've added so many guys via the portal, and that's true. But what is exceptional about this team and may give them a leg up in that league, in another fashion, is that they've got a lot of guys like this player who were they weren't starters, but they were in the rotation
Right.
as freshmen. So they're actually returning players. They're in a different role in some instances. They're playing more than they did last year, but they're familiar with McMillan's program, with what he wants, his expectations, and that's helpful. That could be nothing but a positive.
I mean, having a foundation makes sense.
In an era where the common theme is more like what we saw last night with Bowling Green, where essentially everybody's new.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Well, and to your point, Josh Holloway, 6'2" sophomore guard, was part of the rotation last year for Samford. It's freshman. He's averaging 6.3 points a game on 46-0, so 0 for 9 from 3 and 71 shooting. Second on the team in assists at 2.5 a game, but he also averages almost 2 turnovers a game.
Yeah, so he'll play some point in relief of Jones. The problem is he's not nearly as efficient as Jones. So when Jones is out of the game, that's when you're probably going to see Samford's mistakes kick up. But yeah, they expect a lot out of Holloway. That he can be an effective scorer. He hasn't dialed it in from 3 as of yet. I'm just real briefly going to take a quick
see if he's
look
done anything today. Yeah.
at their score to see if he's done anything. And yeah, and he's 1 for 2, so he's broken the seal on 3-pointers.
He's 10% now.
And interestingly, the guy we just talked about, Allenspach, who we said, well, he's more of a conventional guy. He's 3 for 3 from deep today. So I guess
their 3-point numbers
goes
look
to
much
show.
better going to the game, than what we're reporting here. So
they are, because they're 19 for 38, so they're 50% on high volume.
Oof, man.
So yeah,
and that's the first half.
That's no, the game. It's at the under 8 timeout.
Wow, that's still a lot of 3-point shots. Wow.
Yeah, and it's.
Next, we have Hamad Oladinka, 6'9", 215-pound sophomore, transferred from Utah Tech, averaging 6.3 points a game and 3.3 rebounds a game, with a little under 2 blocks a game. 79% from the floor, but only 43% from the line.
Yeah, so I think you can see the equation here. This is a guy, everything he does around the rim. He also is just shy of 2 blocks per game. So he's their only rim protection element. They really don't have that other than him. So this is kind of a live-bodied, athletic interior guy that on offense, it's layups or dunks. That's it. If you put him at the line, he's probably not going to hit. And defensively, he's able to rebound decently, but also give you some shot blocking. So again, a nice piece for them to have that you don't always see at their level.
Yeah. Finally, or not finally, I guess next to last is Lucas Wall, 6'5" sophomore, who again was in Samford last year as a freshman. He's averaging 6.8 points a game, 4.5 rebounds a game on 50, 25, and 83 shooting in, playing about 18 minutes a game.
Yeah, and he's there to give them a little bit of shooting and some size on the wing at 6'5".
And finally, Zion Wilburn, 6'5" freshman who managed to sneak into here without being transferred anywhere. He's from Northern California. He's averaging a little under 3 points a game in about 10 minutes, shooting 25, 0 and 83, just only a couple 3 attempts.
Yeah, and he's the 10th man, but I think it's probably fair to expect that Samford, much like the way Tom Izzo does it, when you choose to play that style,
Yeah.
it really necessitates having a deep bench. I think you saw that Bowling Green game, Todd Simon, and I understand why, because he's in a game with a big time opponent and he's in the game. So
Yeah.
he has a chance to win it. Or he feels he does. I don't blame him for going heavily with the starters, but you see what can happen.
Yeah.
And I'll bet that Bowling Green doesn't do that very often through the rest of their schedule. Samford, we'll see if they change it up at all, but their MO is very similar. They really do have a 10-man playing group, and it's kind of out of necessity if you're going to play that way,
Sure.
So this kid, he's playing 10 minutes a game. He's clearly the 10th guy in the rotation, but I do think he's likely to stay in that rotation.
So the players for Samford, the Bulldogs, who do you think is a player that Michigan State needs to keep in the gutter?
Well, that's a really tough one, because they've got a lot of guys who have been solid. Nobody has really, I guess you could say, Brownell, because he's been their leading scorer throughout. Yeah, it's a tough one. I'm actually gonna go off the board, and I'm gonna go, and it'll be a little bit unconventional in terms of how we measure this. I'm going to go with Rylan Jones,
Okay.
because first of all, he's had a big game finally against Texas Southern today. 6 for 7 from 3, has 18 points. But even beyond the scoring, he's the fulcrum of that team offensively. And I think if Michigan State can try to force the ball out of his hands, not allow him to have an efficient day running their offense, that will go a long way toward earning a Michigan State win.
All right. So let's move on to the Squeegee Squad of Grand Rapids for the clean the glass component of our show. If you need your glasses cleaned, whether it's I keep saying glasses, if you need your glass cleaned in your home or your high rise, maybe your business, even the state capitol, make sure the Squeegee Squad Grand Rapids is your first call. You'll get great pricing. They do great, gentle work on your windows, inside and the outside. They can do your screens and the windowsills. They can power wash your house. They'll get up on the ladders. So again, you don't have to. So you can see it. The only time people we want on ladders is Michigan State when they're cutting down some nets in Final Four. So make sure you call the Squeegee Squad of Grand Rapids. They have great pricing, 15% off if you mention Final Four when you get your estimate. You can find ways to contact Troy and his team. And again, the Grand Rapids is a fairly large region. It's not just the city of Grand Rapids. So you can be quite a bit outside and they're going to try and accommodate you. You can contact them just through our support page. You can find the link for the estimate there and to get a hold of Troy and his team. Also, if you need some painting done inside your house this winter, they've got some people who are great and available, and they can help you take care of that as well. The same discount applies. So if you need any work done inside or even outside the house, you can call the Squeegee Squad of Grand Rapids. And so it's still tied 1-1. You talked yourself into and then out of Jaden Akins yesterday. So you would have been up 2-1. So you get first pick today. And who are you taking for the player Michigan State's going to clean the glass best?
I'm going to go with Jackson Kohler.
Okay.
I think he's going to have a bounce back. And I think that what helps him here is even if he struggles some in the matchup with a team that's probably going to mostly go small ball four, I still think he's going to end up on the floor a lot uh, because I could see him playing more small ball five.
Yeah, I think that's reasonable. Yeah, I think almost in some respects, you need someone who can rebound and you need someone who's going to be on the floor the
Yep.
most minutes. And so, yeah, Kohler's a good choice. And for that reason, I'm going to go with Akins just because I think, although picking back to back big rebounding performances by players
Yeah.
seems like it's a
That's
bit risky.
yeah.
But I think just the nature of the team is similar to Bowling Green in the sense that you're going to have a lot potentially, assuming they miss a bunch of threes. You have a little opportunities for longer rebounds. And I think someone who's athletic and is going to be on the floor enough, I think, to pull out some rebounds. So we'll see.
I'm
But I
gonna
think it's
I'm
definitely
gonna
could be there.
I'm gonna throw a wild card out there. Obviously, neither one of us picked this guy, so it won't count. But kind of piggybacking on that idea you just mentioned, and the fact that can you really expect Jaden to have a huge rebounding game two consecutively?
Right.
Um, I'm gonna say it would not shock me to see Frankie Fiddler have a big one.
Yeah, he's due, I suppose. I think the
He's
most
had
he's had is
one.
four
He's had
in a game.
he's had one strong rebounding game. He had
Yeah.
8 against
Eight.
Kansas, I
That's right.
believe.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
And again, the same thing applies to what you just mentioned to Akins. If they're taking a lot of threes, presumably there could be a lot of long rebounds, and Fiddler would fit into being a guy who might be in a position to corral some of those. So he's, even though neither one of us picked him, he's a guy to watch, I think, as well.
Yeah, and the one I think the one reason you wouldn't want to pick Fiddler is just because his minute distribution has not been super high. I think he's
Yeah.
maybe only had 20 minutes, maybe once this game, maybe twice this year, but or this season. So we'll see. But I mean, I think the more effective he is and out there and hitting shots, the more he's going to be playing. I think that's pretty much how it goes for a lot of these guys for the most part. You know how much you're contributing on the floor,
Yeah.
both ends of the floor. So
Yep.
going on to the 5 keys of the game, brought to you by Nudge Printing. The Nudge Printing provides all the prizes for our show. They're been our longest supporter and sponsor of the show. Gabe and Brittany do fantastic work as Spartan alums, Michigan-based company in Portland, Michigan. They make everything here. They have the highest quality shirts and jackets and quarter zips and t-shirts, whatever you want to get. They've got the best stuff. I mean, it is truly hands down the best and the favorite of my family, whether working out, whether just around town, going to games or whatever it is. They have a huge selection of logos too, both vintage and current, S's and the Spartan logos. So you want to check out their selection. It's really big at nudgeprinting.com. You get 20% off. You type in Final Four just as one word at checkout. And Nudge Printing is, again, it won't be a mistake, especially with the holiday season coming up, the first Spartan in your family. It's a good place to go to get some gifts. They've got great shipping. They take care of everything and do really fantastic work. So again, Nudge Printing at nudgeprinting.com. And so the first key of the game is to win the pace. I mean, we've already mentioned Bowling Green plays fast, but Samford's even faster. Samford is about the fast team that you're going to face. So they had a just 2 point loss to Cornell. They had a 29-19 edge in fast break points. We know Michigan State likes to run fast, so we know that Michigan State is not going to change the way they play. Obviously, with Samford, it's highly unlikely that Samford's going to change the way they play. So it's going to be who does best in this sort of high octane game.
Well, to clarify, my point with the Cornell game is they lost that game, and they also lost the fast break points
Oh,
battle
right,
by
yeah,
10.
yeah, right.
Cornell had the edge
Probably
29-19.
from the turnovers. Yeah.
So it is right. That's part of it. But my point is, it is possible to outdo them in that phase of the game. And
Mm-hmm.
look, that's always going to be Michigan State's MO. They're
Yeah.
going to go into every game believing, as they should, we have an edge here. It's just that Samford is going to play that way. It's what they do, so they're used to it as well. And so you have to be very focused in both ends of the court. You know, defensively, we talked about MSU was not great in the first half against Bowling Green in terms of its transition defense. I did think it got better. It has to be better for 40 minutes in this game, not just 20. And
Mm-hmm.
then offensively, yeah, they just got to push. And hopefully you do run into situations where you're getting a few more misses early than we saw from Bowling Green last night, which will, present some opportunities.
Yeah, that was I think famously what I think it was Steve Fisher, wasn't it, back in the NCAA tournament, playing that really great Loyola Marymount team in the
Mm-hmm.
90s, where he said that, yeah, we can run with them. And then little just ran Michigan out of the gym. is that if Michigan State, this is multiple hypothetical, they're still going to play the exact same way they do now if they run into like a Loyola Marymount team, would you say?
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. No, Michigan State's not going to. I've never seen Tom Izzo decide to slow the ball down. The best the best reference point for this, and it hasn't. It's usually not worked out in Michigan State's favor, but when they play North Carolina,
Right.
who
Yeah.
is the only other high major program that really is like Michigan State in that way. They're very similar in terms of how they approach transition basketball. But MSU never dials it down against Carolina. And as I say, there have been times where they've paid a price for that, but it goes to show you that's who Michigan State is, period.
Yeah.
They're not going to change.
Well, and you have personnel specifically designed, you practice a certain
Yeah,
way. It's really hard to play a totally different
right,
way of
right.
a game.
Why
Yeah.
would you?
Yeah. So the second key to the game is offensive rebounding. We've seen a great improvement from Michigan State this year so far, but it's only 4 games in. Samford is a poor defensive rebounding team.
Yeah, really bad.
So we've had this scenario the last few years where we have a bad defensive rebounding team. We think, oh, this is where Michigan State can kind of get going, and they just fall flat in the face. If anything, it goes the other way. This team seems a lot different than the previous teams, and so I think this is just a place where they can get more shots, right? So there's more opportunities to score.
Look, and we've tried to hit on this from a number of different angles, but there is a reality to what's going on with Michigan State offensively this year that I think is not sufficiently well understood by many of its fans. And that is that it has so far, and admittedly, it's a small sample size. We're talking about 4 games.
Yeah.
It has to continue in order for this to be majorly relevant. But Michigan State is vastly, and I mean vastly, improved in terms of its 2-point success rate. So everybody's hung up on the poor 3-point shooting, and I get it. It's an easy thing for fans to understand and to focus on. But Michigan State, the reason that they've still played well, even in the loss that they had, they were competitive. And it's a very good opponent. And then why they've won their other 3 games by double digits is in large part because in every other way that you can score, they are scoring well. I heard somebody made a comment today on Jim Comparoni's board about we talked about the 3-point shooting, not realizing they were making another point that they didn't want to advocate for, but it happens to be the truth. So sometimes it's just as simple as you have to make shots. You can rebound well, you can defend well. Say, yeah, that's true. That's absolutely true. But Michigan State is making their free throws at an 80% clip.
Mm-hmm.
They are making their twos at a that's an area that has not been talked about nearly enough, and I'll even include us in this. In recent years has been how much Michigan State has struggled to score efficiently inside the arc. And that people hear that and they think you're just talking about post-ups. That's not it. That's part of it, but that's just one subset of it. It's also about how much are you getting in transition? How many second chance points are you getting on offensive rebounds, which is why I'm bringing it up here. In all of those ways, this Michigan State team has been much improved so far. Now that needs to continue, and you want to see the 3-point shooting get better, of course. But I'm just saying this notion that seems to be out there that the Michigan State offense is some smoldering wreck on the side of college basketball highway is ludicrous. It's stupid. And it's not true. This is an area where Michigan State should be able to get some things done.
Yeah. Well, I think it's clear.
The weak defensive rebounding opponent. You've been very good on the offensive glass to date. That needs to continue.
Yeah. I mean, the team scored 86 points against Bowling Green, shooting 20% from 3. The team last year would not have scored 86 points, shooting 20% from 3.
No, or any time the last few years.
Yeah, right.
It's not even just last year. This is Tom Izzo's program typically is a one that gets its easy points via transition. Okay. And then other than that, They are mostly a jump shooting offense, but not one that's hugely reliant on threes. So it's a lot of other twos.
Yeah.
Sometimes when they've got good post players, they'll do a lot via the post. Offensive putbacks. Well, those things were not there for that team last year, and really for the last few years. They could really score one way via jump shots.
Hmm.
And that makes it tough. That narrows your path to a victory if the jump shots aren't falling. And it's a dangerous thing to rely on jump shots so heavily. It can be, because that's the one phase of the game that, sometimes, as we've been seeing with MSU's threes,
We've
even
seen
if
this
you
year.
execute the offense well and you get great looks, sometimes they just don't fall. Other things, if you are repeating them, if you're able to get to the line consistently, you're able to offensive rebound consistently, you're running consistently, those things are easier to replicate on a regular basis. They're easier to maintain consistency with, in my view.
Yeah. Certainly easier to be successful. Yeah. Because the conditions are more, to your favor.
Repeatable. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. So third key to the game, foul lines, right? So Michigan State is averaging, well, now they're going to be averaging almost like 28 free throws a game, or 27, or probably by now. Both teams get there to line a lot. Samford, uh, so I guess, who's going to win the free throw and who's going to be able to defend without fouling? Because, especially
Yeah.
looking at Samford, they look like they're much more susceptible to foul trouble, in the sense that I think they have some players who are less replaceable than Michigan State.
Well, there's that, but right, whose depth do you believe in more? But the other thing is, Samford, just as a defense, has been much, much, much more prone to fouling.
Yeah, right.
Michigan
Exactly.
State's actually done a very good job so far of defending without fouling. And that's something that's carried over. That's actually been, because it's historically been a problem for Michigan State, because Tom Izzo likes physical basketball, so he'll live with some of that. Last year's team, the last couple teams, really, that was one of the strengths. They weren't excessively fouling opponents. This year's team so far has carried that over. So if I had to bet on one of these two teams managing to have an edge here in free throw opportunities, it would be Michigan State, even beside the fact that they're at home. It's that I think defensively they've shown to not be very foul prone, whereas Samford has struggled to avoid fouling opponents. One other note in this area I wanted to mention, I was looking at stats and preparing for this. Frankie Fiddler, as an individual, is currently number 10 in terms of average fouls drawn per 40 minutes played. So he's taken 30 free throw attempts, which is a little different thing, because
Yeah,
one, you're
sure.
talking about fouls that might not lead to a free throw, but
Hmm.
he's doing both. Um, that's a remarkable number. He is averaging currently 7.5 free throw attempts per game. I don't think there's ever been a time Izzo team has had anybody close to that. I'd have to look to confirm it, but just I'm 99% sure. After him, you've got a bunch of guys. You've got four other guys who are somewhere between 11 free throw attempts through 4 games and 16. So guys between like 3 and 4. But then you got Fiddler at 7.5. Samford does not have anybody like Frankie Fiddler. It's very balanced
Yeah.
in terms of all their starters draw fouls, so and get free throw attempts.
Hmm.
But I think that, again, this has been a big area for Michigan State in the early going. You want to see it continue, because it's a hell of an advantage when you're getting there with regularity and you're converting. We said after the Bowling Green game, Michigan
Right.
State is at 80% as a team at the line right now. You don't have any. The one guy is Cohen Carr, who's been kind of a weak point. All the
Hmm.
bigs have shot well. I guess Zapala maybe a little
Was he
less,
like
but
2 for 4 or
but
something? But
but
he's barely had any.
Cooper and Kohler have been dialed in, and then
Yeah.
all your perimeter guys are shooting it as well as you'd hoped. So yeah, it's a big advantage. If either team has a significant edge here, that's going to be big.
So the fourth key to the game is the threes. I mean, I don't know much more you have to say. At some point, Michigan State not hitting threes is going to cost them a game unless they start like at least
Sure,
shooting average. So,
sure,
which you could argue
absolutely.
maybe Kansas was one of those games. I don't know.
And the reason that I'm emphasizing all the other things that they're doing well offensively, it should not be taken as trying to hand wave away the fact that they got to shoot better than 20% from three. Of course they do. That's, duh. I mean, that's obvious. But I think you'd be remiss if you don't focus on all the other things that are going well. And why is that important? Because I think if you do believe that eventually, to one extent or another, the 3-point shooting is going to improve, if those other things remain where they've been, then you're really talking about an offense that's tough to stop. But if it continues, is it going to cost them? Yeah. If they shoot the 3-point shot the way they have so far in the games in Maui, they're probably going to struggle some.
Yeah.
I'm not going to say they can't win a game there, but can they win 3? Almost certainly not with the level of opponent they'd be facing. Right. So yeah, it's got to get better. I just want it over, much like when we were in this phase last year. I just don't want to talk because it's dumb. It leads to dumb takes. It leads to people that say this has been a problem for 10 years, whereas you'd be hard pressed to find many programs anywhere in the country that have shot the ball better over the last decade from 3 than Michigan State. That's the truth. All you got to do is look up the numbers. But that's what I mean. It leads to the dumbest discourse, and I just don't have the patience for it. So please, God, hit some threes.
And I will say too, the one thing about almost a struggle, I think somewhat, I don't remember what year this was. I know we've talked about it before in the show, but there's a year when they really just couldn't hit free throws at home, and they would hit them on the road a lot better. And if you start missing threes at home, the crowd, I know those players can hear the groans, feel them, and they can feel the tension with the 3 pointers that don't go. They just need to hit. That's why it seemed like great. They hit the first 2 last game. You're like, all right, now we got that off the back. And then, the struggles came back, but that would be a nice thing to kind of get that off. And I think it might be helpful to get to Maui to start to shoot there. But anyway,
I can see that.
It obviously better just to get it going and right now in preparation for Maui. So the fifth and final key is poise. This is a team Samford that provides a lot of full court pressure. How much they actually try and apply Michigan State. We've talked about this plenty of times in the past. Michigan State generally does a really good job against full court pressure and punishes teams. So, especially with the extra size, and all the ball handlers, I don't suspect Samford will do a lot of it, but who knows?
Yeah, I like this Michigan State team's potential against pressure. I mean, you have to see it to believe it. We really haven't seen it yet, but I'd be inclined to think they could fare pretty well against it. Remains to be seen if Samford goes full tilt in that regard. They might. And, if they do, well, that's going to be important that Michigan State handle it well and not just survive it, but punish it.
Yeah. All right. We'll end it there, and hats off to us for not saying Stanford once. That is big Samford. I will tell you, I asked, we have an Alexa, and I kept trying to ask Alexa, like, where Samford is. It took me 6 times before it understood that I was saying Samford, no matter how slowly I said it.
Palo Alto.
It said Palo Alto or Stanford University in California. I mean, it's like, it was.
You could not find school. I mean, unless maybe you were, talking about like Hillsdale, you couldn't find schools at more polar opposites than those two. Samford is a 6,000 student private Baptist college in Alabama, as I understand it. So yeah, 2 very different places.
Yes, but Alexa still thinks it's Stanford. It drives me nuts. All right. Well, I'll be enjoying the game with the Brothers of Just You Gutters. If you see, wave to us and say hi. We'd appreciate it. So until next time after the game, Final Four is on the schedule. Go green.